Vanessa Williams, who is joining us from realestate.co.nz as spokesperson for realestate.co.nz. Vanessa, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, Ben, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great because you've got some fresh data on what's happening with asking prices and selling prices, which can tell us some interesting things about what people have done over time to their selling prices, and also this idea that eventually the buyer and the seller come together and there's a transaction, which, in the past doesn't always happen. So can you tell us what you found with your data?
Yeah, it was actually a really interesting way we came about this data because someone in the office was saying, asking prices are always bigger than selling prices. And someone else said, well, no, I'm pretty sure, that can be a bit debunked. So awesomely, our data team went, well, actually, we have the power to be able to stress test this. And so we looked at just shy of 55,000 properties over the past sort of 18 months or so. And we looked at properties that had been listed on our site and then sold. And we actually crunched the data property by property. So not just what were asking prices this month and what were selling prices this month as a whole. We actually matched it property to property and found on average nationally that selling prices actually exceeded asking prices. So that's what a vendor is commanding for the property is the asking price, and the selling price is what, as you said, the buyer actually pays for it. And so we completely debunked the office, which was, there's nationally, that number was around $3,000 more. So at that time of transaction, vendors were expecting or asking for a certain number, and they actually achieved $3,000 more.
Wow. So I'm interested in sort of drilling down into that because I'm a data nerd and I'm curious about, because you can say some interesting things with data and they can tell you some interesting things, but then sometimes you need to check. So that number of the asking price, because I'm curious, sometimes people put an asking price up and then over time they might change it. Maybe they drop it. I haven't seen them rise lately, but anyway, maybe drop it. So the asking price you've measured there, is that the asking price just before it was sold or on average over the time or when it started?
That's a great question. So we took it at the moment that it's sold as well, because the reality of it is that you're dead right. If I'm a real estate agent sitting in the living room and Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, your house is probably worth about $1 million. Oh no, that's rubbish. Bob up the road sold his for 1.2 million in 2021, so we should definitely get 1.2 million for our house too. Those conversations happen. The agent can, bring the data to the table, but inevitably, vendors or sellers, they sort of have a bit of sway in what that number is. But look, as you had well said, the market will determine what that number is, where the seller needs to shift, because the chance of you moving your house and changing address to make that property more valuable is pretty much slim to none. So realistically, the only sort of lever you've got if you're looking to move your house in a market is that price point. And so what typically happens is that if a seller or a vendor does come to the market with a higher price point, and I'll just say those 55,000 homes that we looked at, they all had asking prices attached to them. So they were listed asking prices as well. And look, that property does come down over time if the seller is expecting too much to what the market is going to pay. And so that's where I believe what we see with that increase is the effect of real estate agents going, okay, we're willing to accept, let's just for argument's sake say 997,000, and they end up getting $1 million for it.
Yeah. So did you look at the data showing how much the asking price had changed over time? Because we are seeing now that the average time to sell has gone up to about 48 days, I think, for those that do sell. And, there can be changes over time. Have you kept an eye on that, how that's changed over time?
Interestingly, in the first quarter of this year, we saw $63 million drop. I'm saying drop in inverted commas out of the market, which was really vendors having to reset their expectations over January, February, and March this year because it was not where it needed to be in order to get the transaction done. And that's the beauty of the market here in New Zealand. We have a free market, is that anybody can ask whatever they would like for it, but look, the market does not get met until someone is willing to reach into their pocket, get the money out, and pay that price that the vendor is asking for. And so that's what we saw, as I said, in the first quarter of this year, $63 million be recorrected.
So that's the collective market capitalisation of all of those houses and the price reductions they've done over that time. I'm fascinated in this process of how a transaction happens in a market where you've got buyers and sellers, and in theory, everything, if you've got a market situation, everything should sell when eventually, the buyers and the sellers get together and there's a price that they eventually agree. And I, as a kid, I grew up on a farm, you see. As a kid, I used to like to go to the stock sales. Because that's where the action was, and I used to listen to the auctioneer, blah, 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 and Dad would send the cows, the beef cows into the paddock, and there'd be a lot of shouting, and eventually there'd be a sale. And there was never a question that Dad would not sell those cows. They're going in there, they're going to sell today, because he needs the cash, and the bank gave him a call last week, and it's going to happen. And the psychology and the process of reaching that price, I think, is interesting, because housing is slightly different to what you'd get in a normal, situation with a perishable item. This cow's perishable. It's probably going to perish. And a house is not, because it could last for another 100 years, and it's not going to go off. And even if it's not occupied, it's probably going to be okay for a while before it needs maintenance. So I'm curious about how the psychology, the behavioural economics, if you like, of these of the market clearing actually happens in New Zealand, because we've got this history of house prices going up, and then they stabilise, and there's perhaps a bit of a plateau, and then something happens, interest rates are cut or whatever, and then bang, they go up again. And often what happens, and I've observed, is that sellers tend to, when there's a period of stability, or maybe even, God forbid, house prices drop a little bit for a short period, they just wait. They've got well, I don't have to move. The bank's not pushing me out. Sure, I really want to move on. I'd quite like to downsize or upsize, or, I want the extra bedroom, or, I have to move to this other place because my daughter's there or whatever. But I can wait. Time is my friend here. I just need to wait. There's always a rebound. House prices peaked at the end of 2021. We're now in 2024. Depending on how you measure them, they're still down 10 to 20%. Depends on, everyone's different, but broadly. And that's actually the biggest fall for the longest time in our history in nominal terms. And who knows where house prices go, but the current forecasts from people like the Reserve Bank and the Treasury and market economists suggest we may go for 6, 7, 8, in some cases 10 years before we get back to the peak. And I'm curious about what you're seeing from the listings and sales and data you've got on. How long can people wait before they have to go, I need to move on with my life? Is there any sense of how long that period could be?
What I would argue is that we are in what I would call a standoff, again, those lovely inverted quote marks at the moment, when we have been for about 2.5 years now. So exactly what you have said, we have not seen an increase in house prices in a 12-month period like we saw in 2021. Double-digit growth in a year, significant double-digit growth in a year. And shortly following that, 2022, we saw a sharp drop of average asking prices dropping double digits as well. So to give you some rough numbers for the listeners, so we got to $1 million in January of 2022, and by the end of 2022, we were back down to around 850. So we call it about a rough 15%. So, bang on there between 10 and 20%. We were bang on 15%. And effectively, since December 2022, we have remained, give or take, around that 850 mark for 2.5 years now. So it is a really interesting conversation around when do sellers actually just move on with their lives. Now, I would break this up into a few different pieces. I think there is perhaps those who are looking to exit or downsize that are going to be far more stubborn around waiting, because you're dead right. There isn't a lot of urgency in that end of the market when they're like, you know what, we just do a bit more vacuuming for the next couple of years. I'm okay with that because we'll wait to get back to that peak. How long that peak is, how long it takes to get back to that peak is yet to be seen, because hindsight is a beautiful thing. But what I have noticed is that people who are perhaps upsizing or sideways sizing or needing to move for a specific reason because of a specific life stage, there's only so long you can keep baby and toddler in a room, or there's only so long you can have mum sharing a room with toddler if you're trying to, work out different generations in a home, or there's only so long you'll commute for before you go, you know what, actually we're transacting in the same market, let's just start to move. Because what is really interesting, where vendors will not meet the market, that the houses are not moving. There are properties on the market for 6, 8, 12 months, and if you're looking to buy, maybe you think, oh well good, we can negotiate quite hard on that one, but actually maybe you've just got a stubborn vendor. And actually that negotiation piece is not going to work, because I will also say there are some very well-priced properties where vendors have gone, you know what, we're transacting in the same market, let's just get it done, and properties are moving. I was chatting to one of our top real estate agents yesterday, and he said last week he had 4 properties on multi-offers. 4 properties multi-offers. And again, in that well-priced middle range of the market, with a realistic vendor, you will get stuff moving. So that piece there is interesting.
Yeah, and I wonder too, for those people who decide they're stubborn and they don't really want to need to move, they can take the listing off the market. What are you seeing there in terms of listings that are withdrawn? Maybe because it's the middle of winter and you think, oh, I'll come back when the sun comes back. What are you seeing there in terms of listings being taken off, or maybe then being put back on?
Yeah, and so this is the time of year that we see the biggest amount of withdrawn listings that aren't sold, and that's you've got a hammer on the nail there. It's exactly because people go, it's a bit wet, it's a bit miserable, it's a bit dark. What we'll do is we'll pull it back off. We'll give ourselves a break from open homes or people snooping around and looking to buy. And actually we'll bring it back in for summertime when we've had chance to repaint the fence, or we've, given it a bit of a facelift at the front of the house after the winter months. And this is actually the time where we see very seasonally. If it's a hot market, we see far less of that. We're not in a hot market. So we are starting to see people pull them off the market at the moment, give it a couple of months breathing space, get it in for September and October. So that has increased, especially compared to the last couple of years.
Yeah. Oh, well, we shall keep an eye on this market and see when something changes, because interest rates seems to have stopped falling, and I get a sense the standoff is still happening to an extent, and I, like any market watcher, capitulation is an interesting moment. Not that I'm suggesting it's happening or going to happen or should happen, but it's an interesting one to watch for. And on the other side, when is there going to be some impetus or stimulus? In past years, it's a big drop in interest rates, or it's a change in Reserve Bank policy on loan to value ratios or whatever. And so we'll see whether that happens. Vanessa, thank you so much. I'm glad there's another data nerd out there who loves a good sift around the numbers to try and work out what's happening in our housing market, which I have a saying is at the heart of our economy. We have an economy that's a housing market with bits tacked on sometimes. And I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much to Vanessa Williams, spokesperson for realestate.co.nz. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.